Hi, everybody. I have never felt, yes, applause. I have never felt like such an underachiever as I do right now, sitting up here on this panel. My God. So I think that it makes sense to emphasize how timely this conversation is, because recently the Hallmarks of Aging were updated for the first time in a decade, going from 9 to 12. And that was the result of lots of research, countless studies on longevity and disease prevention, and 3 new hallmarks were added, and those were disabled macroautophagy, chronic inflammation, and dysbiosis. And even though we know all of these hallmarks are related and interconnected, obviously, the ones that were just added are particularly relevant to today's conversation, along with one of the existing ones on dysfunctional mitochondria. So Chris, you have been on the vanguard of this research for over a decade. Federico just said 15 years. So can you explain briefly some of the new ones, specifically disabled microautophagy, and maybe get into mitochondrial dysfunction a little bit?
Sure, would be glad to. So what's important in all of our cells to keep the energy levels high is the presence of mitochondria, which are producing ATP constantly as we live and breathe. But what's really important is as they're producing this ATP, they get damaged, and so they need to be recycled. And this recycling process of the mitochondria is called mitophagy, and that falls in this disabled autophagy that you were speaking about. And so what happens is normally when we exercise and when we live, this mitophagy continues to function and it continues to recycle the mitochondria. But as we get older, the mitophagy rates decline. And as we exercise less and as we change our dietary patterns and behavior, that level of mitophagy declines, and consequently what happens is that the mitochondria function declines along with that, because you have all these dysfunctional mitochondria inside of our cells. And so if you can act at the level and stimulate this process of mitochondrial turnover and getting rid of and clearing out that damaged mitochondria so fresher functional mitochondria can take their place, that's really a way to intervene on the level of healthy aging and longevity and sort of keeping yourself at your peak.
And Urolithin A is at the heart of sustaining that.
That's the core of our technology. Urolithin A is this postbiotic that our gut produces naturally when we eat certain foods like pomegranates, berries, and nuts. And what it does is it stimulates this process of mitophagy. And so it stimulates the turnover of mitochondria, and consequently you see the mitochondria and the function of the cells increasing. And then from that, it's the function of the collection of cells, the tissues that they comprise, that start to work better in a concerted manner. And then you have improvements like improvement in muscle function and other types of functional areas.
So what I'm hearing is we have our mitochondria, or the energy that powers all of our cells. We have this innate system for quality control, right? Clearing out the bad ones, bolstering the good ones, but we need Urolithin A to have that system operate optimally.
Correct.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Just want to make sure. This is a lot of complicated information we're dealing with for those of us that don't have all the letters after our name. So Mark, I assume because you wrote a book called Forever Young that you think that we have Young Forever. Sorry, Young Forever.
That was Bob Dylan.
Equally as renowned. That you think we have some control over how we age, right? That we can influence it, obviously. So can you talk a little bit about, expand on what Chris was talking about, but also dysbiosis, how that factors in, chronic inflammation, what the downstream effects of those problems are, and most importantly, what can we do about it?
Yeah. I mean, in my talk, I basically kind of made reference to the hallmarks of aging, which are processes that are identified as kind of going awry as we get older. And they kind of work in different ways, but I do see them in a hierarchical way, and I think the deregulated nutrient sensing, which is really related to what we're eating, is in the problems that happen if we eat the wrong way with too much sugar and, let's say, not eating all the time and not. Oh, my mic. Hello. Oh, you want me to speak up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Use your outdoor voice. Outdoor voices.
So I think in terms of the hallmarks of aging, the deregulated nutrient sensing is a key sort of meta hallmark that is governed by what we eat, and some of these longevity switches like mTOR, which regulates autophagy, and AMPK and sirtuins, and the insulin signaling pathway are influenced by obviously what we eat. And I think that what we eat also influences our gut and our microbiome, but also influences inflammation through many of the same mechanisms that are related to the deregulated nutrient sensing. It also affects our mitochondrial function and well-being in terms of how we eat, when we eat, timing of eating, exercise, protein. So I think all these hallmarks are interconnected. They're not like separate problems or diseases. And I think the reason I added the microbiome in my book because it was so obvious that was an issue, and I think the autophagy part is sort of, it seems like a little redundant. The third one, inflammation, is already a hallmark. So I think it was mentioned as a sort of mechanical problems. I don't know exactly what they're referring to, but the point is that we have the power to influence these through what we're doing in our lifestyle, and I think there are all kinds of phytochemical compounds out there that are influencing these hallmarks and regulating these pathways. For example, I mentioned phycetin, that's a senolytic that kills zombie cells, or quercetin, affects AMPK. So a lot of these pathways are regulated by these phytochemicals. And what's fascinating about Urolithin A is that it's something that's commonly can be derived from food, but our microbiomes are so degraded that most of us can't actually make that conversion. To me, it's kind of just a miracle when you think about this sort of symbiosis between our health, plant compounds, the microbiome's health, and how that interacts. I mean, you have to have a healthy microbiome, you have to eat the phytochemicals. They create a postbiotic, a metabolite that we absorb, then somehow knows to affect our mitochondrial function, to increase protein synthesis, to increase mitophagy, to increase fitness and VO2 max and muscle strength without exercising, which is amazing to me. Yeah. So you think about
I've seen the Instagram. I've seen the exercise happening.
Well, no, lately. I actually use it. I actually use it after I exercise every day. But I find that it's one of those. I didn't do any exercise. It was just the MitoPure that I took. That was it.
So you take MitoPure after you exercise? Okay.
Yeah. But I think it's one of the few compounds that's had the amount of research, the rigorous kind of research. It's really almost like a food as medicine company that has done pharmaceutical grade research on the product, which is expensive and time consuming, but it actually shows us the mechanisms by which some of these phytochemicals work, which to me is just a friggin' miracle. Yeah. When you think about it, and how we can start to kind of use these compounds therapeutically as physicians or practitioners to help our patients. I think it's a huge advance, and it's also sort of one of the few products out there that's kind of sort of highlighted this sort of relation between polyphenols and things that we consume, how they're affected by the microbiome, how they're changed and transformed, and how we then use them. I mean, it's just how that even happened. Like, how did that even? To me, it's just a mind-blowing.
It is.
I mean, think about there's this thing that's some metabolite of some bacteria in your gut that gets absorbed and then knows where to bind on which receptor to have this action that does all these beneficial things. It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. And I think I want to underscore the point you made about the compromised microbiome, because Urolithin A is native to our bodies, but many people can't get it through food sources alone, no matter how healthy your lifestyle is, because of, one of the reasons being disabled, microbiome or, dysfunctional microbiome. So do you have a sense, Chris, of how many of us are efficient at this? How many of us need something like MitoPure? Do we have a way of knowing?
Well, I would say, to start out with, I think we probably all could benefit from taking MitoPure, because to get the the doses that even if you have the right gut microflora that will allow you to convert the polyphenol sources into urolithin A, you're not going to get the quantity, the dose of urolithin A you need that's going to be enough to trigger that process of mitochondrial rejuvenation. But in terms of the number of people that actually have the right gut microflora, we've run a clinical study on that, and we've looked at people taking pomegranate juice and the amount of those people who could actually produce urolithin A or not produce, and we found around 40% of people can produce it. And the interesting finding was that it's at different levels. So you have people who are very low producers or medium producers and then high producers. So it's not this one-to-one.
It's not a yes or no thing.
You get a whole
could be
spectrum.
but only 40% are producers, 60% aren't. So even if you are, you can benefit from it. But clearly, more than half of people need it to begin with.
Yeah, it's getting it's like anything in terms of nutrition, getting things at the right dose. That
the
can
efficacy
actually,
factor.
Stimulate that efficacy. Without that right dose, you fall underneath that sort of that therapeutic window of your nutrient, in this case the postbiotic urolithin A. Then you're just not going to get the benefits that you need.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for explaining that. JJ, I have been following you for a long time. You're such a passionate advocate of nutrition, but also fitness, even though, you still had trouble getting up on this stool too. It wasn't just me.
It's wobbly, it should be clear.
Teasing. Why do you think that muscle function has been overlooked as, a big part of healthy aging?
Yeah, and my start was
as
fitness.
much.
Like my start was exercise science, and in grad and doctoral school, all the research was done on cardiovascular training, except I went rogue and did strength because I was paying my way through grad and doctoral school by being out in the world. And what I saw out in the world is that the endurance athletes looked completely different than the strength athletes. In fact, I would take clients to Gold's Gym in Venice. And right? And I remember looking at this one woman going, from the back going, she was remarkable, and she was probably 80 years old. And so it was really clear to me, first of all, pumping iron, man. I'm like, I want to have what she's having, right?
Yeah, I want JJ's arms.
Me too.
They're all doable. And I had better arms at 59, almost 60 than I did at 29. And that's what's really, really amazing about this. But so you look at it and go, all the research was skewed away from this, but it was really clear that if I wanted to make money in my career, I had to get results, and it wasn't by having people do endurance training. In fact, I was telling David, I was listening to a study where, and it just was an N of 2, it was 2 guys, a twin study, where they had one guy who'd been an endurance athlete his whole life and had documented all of it, and the other guy was a couch potato. And guess who had better muscle mass at 70? The couch potato. Now, this is not to say be a couch potato. Like, that is not what this is. You could be a couch potato and take exercise in a bottle. That's what I call this. When I did the podcast, I'm like, this is exercise in a bottle, but I don't want to say that because that's not the message.
Although
okay,
that'd be a great tagline.
However, so you look at muscle and you go, what the heck, what has gone on? Now, what I like to say to clients, because way back when I started talking about muscle, they're like, I don't want to get big. I'm like, in your wildest dreams, this would happen to you. Like, you don't have the hormones to be able to do this. I see what the guys are doing down at Gold's. But what I like to think of it as metabolic Spanx. We know that muscle's a metabolic organ, and Spanx, we all know what Spanx are. Even the guys are buying Spanx now with what's going on. It holds everything in tighter, supports a better metabolism, but it's also a sponge. It's a sponge that's going to help you store your amino acids, but more importantly, it's a sugar sponge. So you're not going to go make that fat. You're going to have a place where you now have stored energy, stored glycogen to use for your next big workout. So that's super important. So we've got this endocrine organ that we're not using, and we have, what was it, 6.8% of us are now metabolically healthy, and insulin resistance at the core. And how do you get insulin resistance fixed quickly? You just freaking build your muscles, right? You build your muscles. And so what do you need to do to build your muscles? And this recommendation out there that we need to do 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week is making us sicker and more unhealthy. Now, granted, most people aren't even doing that, but we gotta lift heavy things. In order for you to build muscle, well, what's interesting is I'll talk protein and MitoPure, but in order to really build functional muscle, so you have the strength and the stamina, you have to lift heavy things. Now, strength's related to lifting heavy things once or twice, stamina over time, and hypertrophy is really doing more over time. But these are big functional movements. They are not sitting on a little leg machine doing this, or a thigh machine, or doing, I saw someone in the gym 2 days ago, hopefully you're not in the room, doing this little like leg lift. I'm like, get up and squat. Get up and squat. Do things so that when you're 80, you can get off the toilet. You know, do push-ups, do bent over rows, do the things that mimic everyday life. So that's the first part. And the second part we know as we age is we get anabolic resistance. Now,
Are you taking new clients?
I tried to get you to do weight training how many years ago? I said,
we went to a conference, I think before I started weight training, and she's like, let's go to the gym. I'm like, okay. So like we're doing this weight training thing. I couldn't move for like 3 or 4 days.
you told me it was a week.
Oh, maybe it was a week. It could have been longer.
Now, if you'd listened then, just
and I was like, oh, this is dumb.
He's
I don't wanna
making
be
up
in
for
some-
lost time.
This hurts. Why would I do this?
Yeah, you're making up for lost
But
time
here's what's
now.
interesting in the diet. Like in the diet world, we talk about like eat more fat, eat less fat, eat more carbs, eat less, but no one ever talks about protein. And really, everything should be built protein first. That is my whole mantra with diet. Start with protein first, start with clean protein. But we need to get that protein in. And really, you know, your bumper meals of breakfast and dinner are the super important, again, for the leucine to trigger mTOR. But get your protein in. 30 grams is sort of my like baseline, get it in. And make sure that you're doing that. And even if all you did was say, I'm not going to lift heavy things, JJ, I'm not la 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 la. And all you did was increase your protein to 0.7 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. And if you're vegan or vegetarian or under stress, go to the higher end, you will have more lean mass. Just doing that. Now imagine if you also lifted the heavy things, and then if you look at it, you've got to work them, you've got to feed them, but then you've got to recover them, and that's really where Urolithin A comes in. Now, granted, you could just do that and get stronger, right, and have more muscular endurance. But if you put together the protein, push through the anabolic resistance, you put together the resistance training, and you put together the MitoPure, it's like 1 + 1 + 1 = 1,000.
So is it safe to say that you take MitoPure in addition to doing
Here's
those
what's
other
super
things?
cool. I was telling you this yesterday. So at 39, I did a DEXA. I was 150 pounds. I had 13% body fat. At 59, I did a DEXA. I was 150 pounds. I had 14% body fat. Now I was a little upset about the percent. But
1%.
that was just as I started to take MitoPure. So I'm
slipping,
really
you're
where I know I'm
slipping.
slipping. But yeah, MitoPure, I do creatine and protein, and I'm really I macro
By the way,
track my
normal for
protein.
women is 20 to 30%, just so you know.
Yeah, 14
14% is
very
like
low.
elite athlete for women. It's great
I
for
have a fitness Hall of Famer, Mark.
Rub it in.
Hello.
And I think
So
I'm
yes.
that's the next part of my career. I think when I get the fitness,
I
whatever
might
that
know
award
someone that
you
could
got.
help you. Yeah. All right. So yes, I do every day, and so does my hubby Timmy. You should see his biceps. There you go.
Yeah, he was like a skinny guy
He
when I met
was.
him.
He was a skinny guy.
I noticed that. I was
Yeah. There you
like,
go.
I was like, wow.
Well, I've just started taking mine, so next time we meet, hopefully I'll
We can do
my
an arm
arms will resemble more closely to yours. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that really mitochondrial health and all the things surrounding it sort of equal health and the function of that, and that extends to some other very important things like heart health and brain health and immune function. So, those are all topics we all need to know about. So, Chris, do you want to talk about the brain health piece?
Sure.
I know.
Sure, we can
following
talk about
some
the different
studies.
types of health areas that that we've been looking at. I mean, one area of health that that we've been looking at through with our collaborators has been immune health and immune aging and this idea of T-cell exhaustion as you get older. And it's known that as you get older, you react. You don't react to the vaccines as well as you did when you were younger. And this also is coming with those people who have cancer, and that leads to this immune cell exhaustion. And what we've seen preclinically with some of our collaborators is they've basically looked at the immune cell function in contexts where immune cell would be exhausted, and that's when you're challenging with, for example, a tumor cell, and also looking at how they react after in animals after they're taking Urolithin A. And what they've seen is that those immune cells become less exhausted, and the stem cells are boosted, and they see an impact on cancer in that area. And it's been so interesting that we've decided to sort of take that to that next level and study the effect of MitoPure Urolithin A in humans and in different immune studies that we have kicked off this year. And so one of those studies will be characterizing the effect of Urolithin A in people after taking a dose of 1 gram, and monitoring the effects on all the different immune cells. And we'll be studying this with some great scientists there, and also over in Switzerland we've kicked off another study where we'll be looking at following the sort of the rebuilding of the immune system post-cancer. And so that's, after cancer, and when you have cancer, that really impacts and ages the immune cells. And so the idea is to then, follow people post-cancer, give them MitoPure for an extended period of time, and then characterize their immune cells as that changes. And so we think that immune, obviously your mitochondria are in basically all of your cells except for your blood cells. So by improving your mitochondria, at the core, you're improving cellular function, and we think this goes, it goes beyond just muscle, it goes to immune, and also you were mentioning heart. Heart is also a big one. We've been doing some studies, preclinical, on heart, and looking at the effect in mice on heart aging, and we've shown an impact on basically cardiac function as the mice are aging when they're taking Urolithin A. And so that's something very exciting, and we'll have to see how people, in humans, how that sort of translates. But yeah, it's a very exciting area.
That is, and this extends to brain health as well. I think there's, it makes sense, right?
Sure.
It's all the things you're talking about.
Yeah, there have been other studies in brain health as well, not by us in particular, but by other academic labs where they've looked at the effects on memory, particularly in Alzheimer's animals models, and they've seen an impact on that as well. So very interesting. Of course, we're a nutrition company. We're not a pharma company, so we're not going after Alzheimer's disease. But I think as a nutritional supplement, it's interesting to follow, and we'll be looking also at the at potential impacts in brain.
So much just comes down to mitochondrial health across the spectrum of every aspect of longevity and health and well-being. And I think it's reminded of when you're talking about the brain. Christopher Palmer is a psychiatrist at Harvard who basically by accident discovered that he could cure schizophrenia in one of his patients by putting him on a ketogenic diet, which he did for weight loss, not for his brain, and the schizophrenia went away. And he wrote a book called Brain Energy, which is about how do we treat mental health problems using mitochondrial therapies. Yeah. If you look at sort of autism, Suzanne Go from Harvard, and I think now she's at USD, she basically looked at functional MRI imaging and mitochondrial dysfunction in autistic kids and provided basically supplement support for mitochondrial function, and these kids would get better. So it's like wherever you look in the body, whether it's the immune system, the brain, the heart, the gut, obviously muscles, it's sort of this essential thing that we have to understand, optimize, maintain. It's sort of how a lot of those 4 nutrient sensing pathways work is by increasing mitochondrial biogenesis and mitophagy and autophagy. So it's really it's just so central to everything. And I think we get trained almost nothing on mitochondrial function and health in medical school except the Krebs cycle, and then we forget it. So it turns out it's probably the central thing to think about, and the final common pathway through which all things happen. So how does inflammation cause problems? How does oxidative stress cause problems? How does insulin resistance and sugar cause problems? How do toxins cause problems? It all is sort of mediated through the mitochondria. So whatever you can do to optimize your mitochondrial health, I think is so key to just general health and also
yeah, I was listening to a podcast with Chris Palmer recently about exactly what you're talking about the implications for mental health as well as, just
I hope it was my
cognitive
podcast.
function. It might have been your podcast. I haven't read the book yet, but it's on the list after your recent one. JJ, we're not talking about addressing these things in the last chapter of life, right? This isn't about like the golden years. This is about living healthfully and vibrantly for our entire lives. I assume you don't say the things you said earlier to just people who are, a little bit more advanced in age, right? This is something we need to be thinking about as soon as we can.
Right. I mean, the biggest mistake we've made, there's been so many mistakes we've made in our health.
Yeah.
I was like, the biggest. But I think one of the biggest things that we've done to our kids is take PE out of schools.
Oh,
And now we have 20, but that
Incredible.
plus, giving them Ho-Hos, Twinkies, and
right.
Yoo-Hoos
The combination
for breakfast.
of those two
But,
things.
you look at it and go, all right, 20% obesity in kids, 18.
Toasted cuss capes are bad for you?
Well, one or two. Everything in moderation,
I
right?
love
That's the
those
other
when I
word
was
that
a
gets
kid.
me crazy, everything in moderation. But if you look at, like, if
Right.
you go
That
back
little
to
white
the...
squirrely thing on the top.
I liked the ding-dongs better. Anyway,
Comes out.
if you go back to that whole, like, the sedentary guy and the one doing a bunch of endurance training, it's like, when should you start? Now, right? And you get kids used to doing sports and building muscle early, like, that will last their lifetime. They'll keep going. So I think that's never too late to start, and it's never too soon to start is the end.
I think that's right. That's exactly right, because it's not like you can't benefit if you start later in life. You haven't missed the boat.
I
You
was
can
at
still do
SD.
things.
I was at USC in their nutrition, exercise science, and aging department, and we had these master's levels athletes, and then they'd bring in people in their 80s and 90s, and you're not going to get big hypertrophy when you're 90 years old, but you can get stronger.
Yeah.
So this can happen at any age, and think about the difference in function if you're stronger versus
Bone density and mobility and joint health.
I mean, we think of those things with muscles, but just an insulin sensitivity and immune function. I mean, it's like if you just focus, we are looking in the wrong direction. We keep talking about losing weight. We don't need to lose weight. We need to put on muscle. If we put on muscle, it will fix those other things. Unless you're eating Ho-Hos.
Yeah.
And even then, it won't be as bad.
Yeah, and it's important also to mention that when we start seeing signs and symptoms of disease, the problem started probably decades before. Dr. Perlmutter talks about this, Mark talks about this. And so that's, not the ideal time to start addressing health issues, is when you start noticing them.
But it's better than not.
Yeah, it's better than not always, but it's, knowing as a 20-something or a 30-something that, you have all this time ahead of you, that you can head off these issues at the pass is exciting. And I wish I knew so much of what we're learning today, when I was in
I know,
my
but
20s
think
and
when we
30s.
were growing up, we weren't living the lifestyle that they're living now, which you have to so actively work against, where we are now sedentary, all these ultra processed foods, all this high stress, all these like it's so much different, just even the last 30 years. I heard the 60 Minutes interview where they're like 50 to 85% of obesity is genetics. It's like, no, because at the 1900s it was 0.5% of the population. I know, I was so angry about that. It's like, no, it is this combination of things that we've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to your point, I wasn't on my phone, looking at social media as a teenager, but I was eating Lucky Charms for breakfast because,
Cocoa Puffs.
Fruity Pebbles, all of those. We could go down. Chris, is there an ideal age to start taking MitoPure?
Yeah, good question. I think the sooner the better. If you look at just the aging process, I mean, why wait till you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s? Why not start, in your 20s or 30s? And we do this with, exercise, right? People start exercising early and to maintain it. So when you have this effect on mitochondria, it's a similar effect as exercise, and this can accentuate and be, additive to that exercise. So we've seen, we have a number of people who are taking our product in their 20s even, and we peak, our muscle function peaks in our 30s and then starts to decline. So, why not start that earlier and be more preventative? And we've seen that there's, at least among our customers, we've heard some very positive feedback from those people who are athletes and early in their life.
So I have a question. So if I'm a worm, I can live 45% longer if I take Urolithin A? So the question is, I'm not a worm. Have you done any of the epigenetic diagnostics on trials of Urolithin A as part of the research you're doing?
No, we haven't looked at longevity in humans, obviously, or in mice, but the epigenetics is a very good point,
just,
and
just
it's something that
putting someone on it for 3 months and then doing your epigenetics before and after and looking at what happens.
This is sort of the next step in terms of health span studies that we'd like to do, is to look at sort of a combination of biomarkers and see how they evolve with time. And so this is as part of our ongoing clinical research. We're sort of expanding into new health areas, and I think that the whole idea of following epigenetics with time, I think that's a very exciting one.
All the things that you mentioned here, but I also see some of the data you guys shared about is addressing sarcopenia, which is what really JJ's talking about, is something we don't learn about as a treatable problem. It's like a thing we don't actually know.
Can you explain that?
Right. So I think DEXA body comp is sort of like getting a blood pressure. In my perspective, it's really essential baseline test and a thing to follow. And so the question is, how good is this in actually increasing? I'm sorry to take your job, but I'm just asking.
No, go for it.
How good is it increasing, muscle synthesis and mitochondria?
Yeah.
And increasing muscle mass.
Yeah, I think the importance is that you're focusing on mitochondria function, so the actual functioning of the muscle tissue that you have, as opposed to going down the route of building up your muscle mass. So it's so MitoPure Urolithin A is not stimulating a growth or this anabolic pathway. It's really optimizing the functioning of the tissue and the cells that you have. So if you have, had the misfortune of a contraction in the amount of muscle mass and having that sarcopenia, basically the idea of combining this in that situation or scenario would be to improve the function of that muscle that you have and make it work at its best and make it work optimal. And I think that's what we should really strive to and to do. So you can start later on in life and try and boost that overall muscle function.
And when we talk about, health span, we're talking about not how long we live necessarily, it's how well we live. Nobody wants to live to 150 if they're, immobile and feel like crap, right? So this is what we're really talking about. Okay, so Chris, you guys, well, first I have a selfish question. I have one of those supplement cabinets that's overflowing. You open the door, things fall out. Some of it's probably expired. A lot of it's expensive. I don't know what to do with half of it. I did when I bought it. I don't know what to do with it now. This is such a foundational supplement, MitoPure. Is it possible that there's some redundancies that I can, maybe get rid of some of those supplements? I know there's a lot of ideal things I should be taking, but this sounds like, I don't know, a bit of a magic bullet in a way. What do you say to that?
Well, I don't like to
tell me that I'm, just fantasizing here, but
I don't like the idea of a magic bullet.
I know, I'm teasing
but,
that, yes.
But I do think it's an interesting concept. If you have a lot of different supplements, not knowing what's in your medicine cabinet.
Everything.
But I would say there's, when you're thinking about cellular health at a fundamental basis, you really want your mitochondria to be functioning optimally to start with. And then you can start adding other types of supplements, vitamins and minerals to further boost your cellular function. But starting at the core, with your mitochondria. I think that's key. As JJ was saying, for your muscle, I think protein is very important for maintaining muscle mass and building muscle mass, and the combination of the two, if you're just thinking about muscle, I think it's a very powerful combination, because you can, on the one hand, you act on the anabolic pathway, on the other hand, you're making sure that the cells and the tissue that you're producing are functioning optimally. So I think that's a very powerful approach.
Can you also speak to the fact that some of your newer products deal with skin health and topically, right? So now we're not talking about ingesting something, we're talking about treating your skin health.
Yeah,
with
I mean,
topical.
it was after some seeing how the effects were translating when you take the supplement orally, we were wondering, well, gosh, this could be very beneficial if we start applying this topically to our skin. And we, as we were talking earlier, mitochondria and all of our cells, and our skin is our largest organ of our body, and so we started formulating products, and I think the interesting thing about MitoPure from a skin perspective is we know that it acts on the mitochondria, we know it acts against inflammation, so it's acting on this, what I would call the intrinsic part of aging, so the natural aging of your cells, and it's also acting on this extrinsic part of aging, which is all of the UV light that we're exposed to when we're running around outside. And so those are the two areas that we were very interested in. So we developed the product with this in mind, and we conducted a number of clinical studies, and we showed effectively that we were acting on the extrinsic area, so that when people were impacted by UV light, we were able to basically reduce the inflammation post UV if you applied afterwards, and then. For those,
but not like preventatively, but topically
after. Yeah. So so you can apply it after, and so it was having quite a dramatic effect, and sort of at the same level of as some of these OTC products that are out there. So yeah, as in terms of anti-inflammatory, and so that was very exciting, and then we ran studies looking at the effects on basically on crow's feet and wrinkles.
This is the part I was waiting for him to get to.
Hand it over.
Yeah, and we saw after a few weeks, we were starting to see an improvement in wrinkle reduction, and we looked at biopsies and after topically putting on skin, and what we saw was an impact also on pathways that are responsible for basically the structure of your skin, so the collagen pathways, and so reduction in the expression of genes that are making proteins that are degrading collagen, and so basically helping to restore and prevent the degradation of collagen. And
it's all energy dependent, right? So
it is, yeah.
But you also one of the studies I saw about Urolithin A was that it reduces CRP, so it has anti-inflammatory properties, not just to affect the mitochondria.
And can you explain what CRP is?
C-reactive protein. I think people know what it is.
And if it does that,
Marker
if it's
of
reducing inflammation, it's improving muscle
Does everybody
protein
know what it is?
synthesis.
Am I the only one?
And so,
yeah, you are.
Yeah.
I'm the only lay person in this audience.
Have you looked at it, whether it increases, it helps with hypertrophy? Because if it does reduce inflammation, inflammation blocks muscle protein synthesis. So if improve mitophagy, it should roundabout help muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah.
We believe so. We haven't looked at that specific pathway, though.
So skin health, obviously not just about attractiveness, it's about health, and it's our barrier against, invaders from the outside world.
Protection, yeah.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So now I'm maybe subtracting something from my supplement cabinet, but I'm adding something to my beauty cabinet. So this is not helping my decluttering, but okay. Well, we have to let Mark go pretty soon, and I know people will want to ask questions. So I think we can turn it over to some Q&A. If you guys have anything, I think there's a mic floating around somewhere potentially. Or just use your outside voice.
Okay. So my question's really to JJ, and the question is about, you made a comment that you're not going to get muscle hypertrophy at 90. So At what age?
Much muscle hypertrophy.
At what age do we feel like we're fighting a losing battle, and is that chronological age or biological age?
Those are amazing questions. I think no one knows the answer to at this point. It would seem more that it would be bio than chronological. And here's what we know right now is that starting at age 40, we lose about a little less than 1% of muscle size, but 2 to 4% of strength, and then it's like 4 to 6% of power. But you don't have to. Again, like I'm hearing all this going, you know, that muscle dip at, what'd you say, 30 or 40? Some of that is because early in our teens and 20s, our hypertrophy is hormonally driven versus mechanically driven. But I think we can offset all of this. And I don't think there's ever a time when it's a lost cause. I think that's the absolute worst way to think about this stuff. I think that whenever you can start is the best time to start, but I think that you need to throw everything at it. So it's protein, it's enzymes to digest protein, it's creatine, it's MitoPure, and lifting, it really is about that overload. What I see most people doing wrong at the gym is they're lifting those pink weights that are paper weights, right? They're not doing heavy, big movements that are cables and free weights and body weight and TRX that really, where you get to that point where you go, I cannot do another one. And that's what we have to get to.
Yeah. That's the pain part I didn't like.
Yeah. No pain, no gain, babe.
Yeah.
No, but the truth is, once you, it hurts a lot at the beginning, but then once you start doing it,
It's like cold water
Yeah.
plunging. You
Yeah.
know, it hurts and then you get numb.
Yeah.
I have a question for Mark and JJ. So, Mark, on your recent trip to Sardinia, how many gold gyms did you see?
literally there's one on every corner.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because they're doing what you're saying, JJ,
Well, yeah,
but in a different way.
Like
They're walking up hills.
Like Carmine, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
that guy who's 87 years old dragged me around his farm and I had to chase him, couldn't keep up. I mean, he was lifting heavy stuff. He was hiking straight up mountains. He was, you know, working really hard in the garden. I mean, he was just doing a lot.
Yeah, we go to the gym because we don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's what we should be
Functional
doing.
stuff, yeah. Absolutely. I don't know how to choose, but choose amongst yourself who goes first.
How many days a week do you recommend strength training?
8.
So I've divided the body into upper body pushing, things like push-ups, chest presses, big compound movements, upper body pulling, bent over rows, pull-ups, hips and thighs, hinging, things like squats and deadlifts, and then power core, which I'll do hot yoga, get rotation, get balance. You know, when you look at aging and all-cause mortality, grip strength, balance, how quickly you walk, all are the things that really matter. So for resistance, as we age, we lose strength more than anything else. So, you know, people tend to focus more on the cardio and the yoga. They need to focus weights, just like protein first on the plate, weights, resistance training first at the gym. And really, if you hit each body part 3 times a week, that's going to be the best for hypertrophy. The hypertrophy zone is somewhere in the 8 to 15, but you can hypertrophy at 30, and you could, but strength tends to be more in the 1 to 5. And it's multiple sets because you only stimulate the fibers you recruit, and the more you do, the more you're going to recruit, right? And then you recover, and MitoPure is an amazing recovery tool here
So
too.
3 days, 4 days, different
So-
body parts, different
so-
days, 5 days, 7 days.
So if you're doing all body parts, like if you were going to do, say, a squat, a deadlift, a pull down, a bent over row, push-ups and dips, you could do that 3 days a week. Or if you want to divide it, I'll go 4 days a week and divide back and forth.
So lower body, upper body.
Yeah, I'll do upper body pushing, pulling, then I'll go do lower body and a little bit of power core. But the reality is your core should be in everything you're doing. You're squatting, your core's
It's
working.
true, yeah.
You're bent over row, you're like the little ab stuff on the ground. This is not functional. We're never on the ground.
No,
We're
it's
not a
true.
bug, you know? So,
It's true. Actually, I did that. You know, after I had my back surgery, I did band training, which, you know, they're kind of can be really heavy. You
I'm
know,
going to get you a TRX.
I have a TRX,
Okay,
yeah.
this is-
And
And some
I
really heavy dumbbells. Yep.
And you know, it's interesting. As I, you know, do the strength training, there wasn't a lot of ab exercises. The Tom Brady program, it's like TB12, and it's what he used. But there wasn't a lot of like sit-ups and crunches, and my core got so strong, and without me even doing anything. And you know, we did a few planks here and there. And then I was at this event where there was a bunch of 30 or 40-year-olds, and there was an hour workout, and we all did a workout. And then afterward, like they had a plank contest. and like I was the last guy standing, and everybody else was like 30 years younger than me. And I think it was because like of all the
Functional stuff.
Yeah, it was really quite amazing.
My question is for Chris on the.
So maybe I can be at the Fitness Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I'll put a good word in.
Chris, can you explain the difference between the powder and the pill, and how often you should take them, and how to take them?
And the dose.
The dosage, and then how long it typically takes to start seeing results.
Sure. So we basically formulated MitoPure into a couple of different formats. One, which is a powder. It's either a berry powder or a ginger powder. So we know a lot of people enjoy taking smoothies or mixing things into yogurts or even cereal. And so we thought this was a great way to make your diet functional and for you to control it this way, because a lot of people don't like taking pills. And on the other hand, there's the convenience of taking pills for all those who do prefer taking pills. So they act interchangeably. So if maybe you enjoy making smoothies on the weekend, you make a smoothie on the weekend and you take pills during the week, or however you manage your morning or the time in the day that you take your products. And in terms of the dosing, as Mark was saying, yeah, dosing is really important. In the sachets, you have 500 milligrams. Each pill is 250 milligrams. So, we recommend a minimum dose of 500 milligrams a day. And, we've done also studies that show 1,000 milligrams can be even better. So, it's really up to you and to try the
So 2
different
packets or 4 pills?
Yeah, 4 pills for 1 gram, or 2 packets for 1 gram.
And how long does it?
Oh, and the time.
Yeah,
So what I can only speak to what our clinical trials have revealed, and that's after 1 month of taking either 500 milligrams or 1 gram, we start to see all the biomarkers in skeletal muscle in leg muscle in our particular study of improved mitochondrial function happening. And in terms of physiological function, we've seen after a 2-month period an impact on physiological function. So,
Thank you.
Have you seen any improvement in, with anybody with vitiligo? I work with a lot of that disease, and with the topical product, improving keratinocytes or melanocytes, or has anybody tried it?
a good question. We've just introduced the product, and it's only been about a month and a half, 2 months. We don't study on disease in disease situations. We're studying on in healthy skin. So I mean, it would be interesting if people have some experience on that to hear about it.
I just want to make a quick comment, and it looks like there's this delineation between mitochondrial function and inflammation. And the reality is that mitochondria are regulating the set point of inflammation. If you think of macrophages, there are 2 main groups. There are M1 group and the M2 group. And the M2 group, anti-inflammatory, sort of nurturing, sort of feminine. M1 group is the aggressive evil twin that is pro-inflammatory. The reason this is so germane right now in this time is because COVID induces a mitochondriopathy. Long COVID are people with mitochondrial dysfunction acquired by this virus. This is, I think, a very important adjunct to the treatment of long COVID. If, the estimates are that 30%, if you've had COVID, of the people perhaps in this room are experiencing issues related to having had COVID in the past. So we just did a thing for PLMI on what you can do for long COVID and why it's an issue. And I think targeting the mitochondria is central to the program. And I reached out to Urolithin a year and a half ago already, because this is very, very exciting. I mean, this is, as Mark was describing, the whole notion that modified by your microbiome to an active form, we see that with sulforaphane as well, is really very exciting, and it's there. It just needed to be extracted, so it's really very exciting.
Exciting.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. I think there was another question over here. Go ahead.
To dovetail, sorry, I don't have a good voice. To dovetail on what you were just saying, do you think that this plays a role in changing the cell danger response and getting them through the checkpoints so that they can progress to the cell keeping response?
So what you're describing, that danger response, is in fact mediated by the mitochondria, oftentimes through a component of the bridge between the inner and outer mitochondrial membrane called cardiolipin. that becomes oxidized as a response to oxidative stress. That's a powerful cell signaling issue. So anything that you can do then to enhance mitochondrial function will dampen that response.
Thank you.
Any last question? Anyone have a last question?
I just have this is directed maybe to you, JJ. Are you familiar with E-Gym, since we're talking a lot about strength training?
E-gyms.
E-Gym, yeah. I uncovered it, so for those of you who maybe are working with the underserved or others at the local YMCA, check it out. I started it, in fact, I was showing Mark over a year ago. It's strength training machines that, you get onboarded, you wear a band, it recognizes you, it has your statistics, and then periodically you do a new strength test every few weeks if you're going regularly, and it knows how to change the machine to you, so it's safe, effective, and my age went from 69 to strength age at 43. So,
Nice.
and I was very concerned. I was looking in the mirror going, wow, I am losing muscle. And having had a mom with ALS and seeing really significant muscle loss, so I just am a real fan of E-Gym. It's those YMCAs.
Tonal. Yeah, tonal. Do you know Matt Beam?
Okay, well, thank you very much. Under one chair, we've got one lucky winner. If you want to tuck under your chair.
One lucky winner gets Mark's book.
We've got one book. And with that, you get 3 year of timeline. So come by the booth.
Probably, yeah.